Welcome to DABCC Radio,
where smart people listen.
Virtualization and Cloud Talk.
Featuring cutting-edge solutions from the hottest companies around the globe.
Broadcasting from the DABCC offices in sunny Sarasota, Florida.
Surrounded by computers, books, and Legos. Your host, Douglas Brown.
Hello and welcome to another episode of DABCC Radio. I'm really excited. We have an EUC expert with us today, and we're going to talk all about end-user computing, and I'm going to throw at him a bunch of different things going on in the world and see what he has to say. So who is that he? Well, we have Leee Jeffries, and Lee's been around quite some time. He's a login VSI expert, one of their champions over there, and of course he is also a Citrix CTP. So a really smart guy, well recognized for his intelligence and his contributions to the greater community, to the industry as a whole. And I'm really looking forward to chatting with him today to see what the heck he has to say, right? These are my favorite podcasts because I get to throw things at great guys and have a nice, fun conversation with them. So with no further ado, let's just dive into my interview with Leee Jeffries. Okay, Leee, thank you so much for doing this with me. We've had a nice conversation before the recording, as I tend to do with my guests. But it's time to press record and start making this official. So we have to tame down the anger. Right?
Yeah, I'm calm.
There was no anger. So for my first question, as always, who are you? So who is Leee and what do you do, man?
Here's Doug. Well, who is Leee? I am Leee with three E's. There's only one Leee with three E's, so that happens to be me. Funny story, actually. My mother decided to name me after a guy called Lee John in a pop group called Imagination in the 80s, and that was where that came from. Everyone always asked that, so now that'll be out in the public.
Interesting.
So what do? I'm an independent consultant, IT consultant, focusing in the EUC workspace. I love what I do. The landscape is ever changing. I think we've got some interesting avenues to sort of go down now. EUC is really dispersed. It used to be, just on-prem virtual desktops, and now it's a lot wider. There's a lot more avenues to go down. So I have three kids, and I work from home most of the time. So I mean, my main priority is what I love. I love anything to do with the water, surfing, scuba diving, swimming. And other than that, it's usually spending time with my kids or doing DIY at home. I do love a bit of DIY.
Very cool. Yeah. I live in a flat nowadays, so the whole do-it-yourself stuff is limited. But we're looking at buying something, and I told my wife that I really want, like a proper house that I can build tons of stuff and fix things and redo everything. So that's just fun. And the whole home automation. Have you automated your whole home? Your entire home?
Not all of it. I do have like a few power plugs in the man cave. So my office is at the bottom of the garden. So I've got one on like the heater for in the winter. So I can tell Alexa when I come down in the kitchen in the morning, put the news on, turn on the heater, turn on the computer, and then I come out here and it's all on. So little bits and pieces like that.
Nice. Very nice. Yeah, there's so many cool things you can do nowadays. It's sick. So, and it's only getting better by the day. Yeah. So, you mentioned you work from home, and, the elephant in the room is always this whole coronavirus thing nowadays. And I think everyone's probably getting sick of it in many ways, right? We want it to be behind us. It's affected our lives, there's in many ways, unfortunately. And but it's an interesting topic, so I have to ask you, how is Corona itself, because you do work from home, has it really affected your job, or what are you seeing, and how's Corona changed your way of working?
Well, as a contractor, I'm currently working for a large insurance firm in the UK, and I was sort of traveling 4 days a week into the office, working from the office. So sort of hour and a half commute there, hour and a half back. So quite a hefty commute in a day. So I'd say, my consumption of Netflix has definitely gone down as a side effect. But I mean, in the main, everything's got busier for me, right? So as soon as COVID hit, you needed everyone to work from home, and this particular client is using Citrix virtual apps and desktops. So it's an upgrade project actually. So the existing estate needed to be sort of scaled up, legacy like Windows 7, 2008 stuff to support like double the amount of users that it normally would in production. So that kept me pretty busy for like the first sort of month that all of this work from home stuff started. After that, I felt like the industry sort of slowed down a bit for the next couple of months. Things just started to sort of lull a little bit, and now things have picked up again, and it's flat out. Everybody got back in the office and thought, right, we want to get on with all these projects that we had outstanding.
Oh, that's very interesting. When you said busier, well, what I saw with the Corona right away was, especially in the remoting world, right? The Citrix, VMware, Microsoft sort of, work from home anywhere or work from anywhere type of mentality, right? That we've all been doing for a long time, is that immediately everyone said, okay, we have to work from home. We need to buy a bunch of licenses. We need to expand our environments. We need consultants. We need everybody to come in and do this 100%, right?
Yep.
And then they did that. And then, okay, everyone's working from home. They might not be working great, but they're working. We don't know what the future's going to, what's going to happen. So we're going to hold off. We're going to save our cash for a while, right? And we're going to just sort of see what happens. So then you saw the slowdown, which is exactly what you said, right? And now things are stabling off. People are getting back to the office, maybe not 100%, but a little bit. Right. Yep. And you were starting to see the uptake, and that makes me really happy that you're seeing that uptake also. Can you expand on that? I mean, it's what are you guys doing as within the update? Just firming up those environments, going back to the way it used to be. What kind of jobs are you doing?
Well, I have a few clients that I deal with locally, sort of around where I live. And we had some projects in the pipeline, like SD-WAN projects and transformation projects. So from sort of 2008 desktops to 2016/2019. And what I found was, a lot of things that were planned were sort of dropped out, but then those were picked up. So these are things that sort of all coming together now, all at the same time. But with regards to sort of businesses doing things outside of this, a lot of things seem to be based around increasing density, a lot of work on Microsoft Teams. Everybody wants to put Teams in, and then you've got your bandwidth and everything else that you need to look at. And dare I say, your endpoints, right, Doug, which is quite relevant to you. I would recommend that, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that the biggest change has been, instead of sizing up your sort of your MPLS or your internal networking, you're sizing up like your internet pipe and trying to beef that up as much as you possibly can, or add multiple internet pipes, because now all your traffic's coming in externally. So that was some of the biggest challenges. I mean, NetScale has played a very big part in what I've been doing, because everybody wants remote access, right? And everybody wants secure remote access now, because there's been quite a lot of vulnerabilities released, and and everybody's working remotely. So that's been a large focus of what I've been doing recently. That's probably the biggest thing.
Very cool. Very cool. The other elephant in the room is WVD, right? This is an interesting one. Before Corona hit, just in January, we had Citrix Summit, and I went off to Citrix Summit, and WVD is starting to hit the market. I think it was still in beta at that time. It hadn't been released yet. I forget. It seems the strangest year, right? It seems like a decade ago, but at the same time, it seems like a minute ago. But anyway, So I started asking folks, a lot of the guys like you, CTPs, EUC experts, and also a lot of my friends that are, own consulting companies and manage big IT shops and or company customers or what have you. What do you think of WVD? And I expected, this is a neat idea. What we're looking at it. We'll see what the future brings. Things like that. The typical. Let's analyze this and see. And what I heard was the complete opposite, and that is we're really excited. We can't wait for this, and we want to go with this as soon as possible. And it really surprised me because nothing against WVD. I think I think it's great that Microsoft's doing this. Absolutely phenomenal. I really love it. But it surprised me at the speed. And then, of course, Corona hits, right? And now you're forced to work from home, and which was the best thing for Microsoft, in the world, right? Or for Citrix, for any of the remoting companies. Sort of proved that what we've been saying for so long is true. We work anywhere, any place, anytime, any device. And, so then the things went through the roof. That being said, I'll ask you the question. What do you think of WVD? Where do you see the place for that? Does it compete, or definitely compete. But how do you compare and contrast that versus, let's say, on-prem Citrix or Citrix Cloud, for that matter? What's your view on WVD, Jeff or Lee?
It's a tough one, isn't it, Doug?
Yeah.
So I mean, when I think about it as a techie, I think I'm running a workload in a service, which is, I can run workloads anywhere, right? In any public cloud or an on-prem environment or whatever. It doesn't really matter. So from that side of things, it doesn't really excite me. I struggle with the, we spent all these years sort of skilling up and learning how to use these solutions and pulling together all these different parts of the solution to make it work. And now we're sort of forced into a world of APIs and having to use like a layer on top of something that's quite complex. So it's almost easy to use, and that's not exciting for me in a sense, Not that
Why wouldn't it be exciting for you if it's easy to use? Is it because it takes away the fun of the engineering side, or?
Yeah, I think that might be where it is for me, Doug. Yeah, it does. I've spun up a WVD tenant in the lab. I've played with it and used it, and it's nice. It's easy, and I can see the benefit for businesses. But I think for someone like Microsoft to say, "Hey, we're going to release a desktop as a service offering, and we're going to directly compete with these other vendors. Yes, we'll integrate and we'll allow them to use it as we always have done, but they are directly competing, right, with the likes of VMware and Citrix." I think, but they've been doing this for years. They know all the little things that are required in enterprises to make this stuff work. So my view with WVD is I think people are using it. I think I've heard it quite before. There's a good enough. So Teams, Skype for Business is good enough, and it's included in what we're already paying for. So I think at the moment that's where that is. But knowing Microsoft and the speed they're progressing, the development is horrendously rapid, right? I haven't seen anything move quite this fast, and that's quite scary. If I was someone that was already doing what they're doing, that would put the fear of life into me, really, because how are you going to compete? How are you going to keep fresh with this new kid on the block that's got everybody buzzing about their new product? The marketing's been really impressive, right, Doug?
Yeah. It's interesting. To me, WVD or the idea of Microsoft hosting, running a DaaS service is today we install, or yesterday we install on Windows Server, running in a data center. Tomorrow we install on, Windows 10 or, a operating system running in Microsoft's cloud. But on top of it, we still layer all of our own stuff. right? Our own technology. You're still using FS Logic. You're still, deploying some, you can utilize Citrix Cloud, for example, right? You're still going to need, a thin print or a printing solution, right? And it's just a new platform. I mean, you're doing a lot of work from remotely. Everyone is nowadays, I guess, for the most part. We're not physically standing in front of a rack of servers. We haven't in a long time, really. So what's the difference, right?
Yeah.
That's the piece to me, and it makes sense. And if we can get a better service, quicker updates, things of that nature, quicker and stable updates, then I think that's a win for everybody.
Yeah, I think that is a win for everybody. I mean, if we extrapolate this out, like, is it really economically viable for all these data centers to be spread out all over the place? I mean, does it make sense for the environment to have these sort of centralized areas where you've got, that's where services run from, and if you want it in a different place, there's another data center over here, but it's all centralized, right? And I looked at I saw an article on where Microsoft had sunk their data center in the sea to keep it cool, and they pulled it out the other day, and it's still running and everything. I mean, it's the future of where it's going to go. So whether I like it or not, that's where it's going to head, right?
Oh yeah. I'm not saying whether it's it's more whether you like it, right? We don't have control over what's going to happen.
You hit the nail on the head, Doug, with the what's different about it? Why? I mean, you've got effort, and you might have some consulting on the side to do something slightly different, but what differentiates it from everything else? I mean, cloud, private cloud, public cloud, not my server, or sits somewhere else. I don't need to worry about it.
Sure.
And then you run a desktop. I mean, the competition wise, it's all getting quite level now, right, with remoting protocols.
Oh yeah. I did a podcast not long ago with Dennis, who runs RDP, the RDP program manager, an old buddy of mine, and I asked him, it's the protocol war still valid, and or if you talk to Benny Trish, Benny's the best to chat with. I mean, well, Dennis knows everything and then some, but Benny's equal to him, and Benny will say, and Dennis said also, is that RDP is just as good as everything else. I mean, we have so much bandwidth that it's not I'm going across a high latency, low bandwidth type of connection anymore. Those are the extreme rare use cases, not the norm, right? That the protocols are pretty much all the same. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think I wrote a blog post about RDP versus ICA, and that was with, I think, Server 2016. So not including all the improvements they put in for sort of WVD and all those other bits. So and I think RDP came off worse. So I think it's interesting. I mean, then you put graphics cards into the mix, and you see where you sit there. And I've seen Benny's presentations as well. And he draws some conclusions. I think there's still an edge on some of the others. I think you're right in a case where you've got plenty of bandwidth. Like, who cares? Low latency, high bandwidth, all good. But the thing that concerns me is, well, if you've got a centralized data center with loads of desktops running in there, obviously you're going to have quite a lot of ingress traffic, and you're going to have to pump a lot out as well. So at that point in time, when you're doing it at that sort of scale, then it matters, right?
Yeah. That's what's great about running in like Microsoft. I mean, that stuff's sitting on the backbone of the web, so bandwidth for those guys is not the same as for, anybody else, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's really interesting times, and I sort of feel like there's going to be a bit of something big is going to happen soon that's going to tip the scales one way or the other for one of these guys, and then that will be the direction that most people head in.
And well, that brings me to the question about the EUC world in general. I think we've been maturing for quite some time. Corona definitely impacted us because it made us. I mean, I think we've always been relevant, right? To me, this is what I've been doing since the '90s. I agree with the technology. I agree with the idea of remoting. I agree with the idea of centralization. but where do you see the EUC world today? One from maturity level, and two is, where do you see us, what's left to do and things of that nature? Make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, right now it's terribly confusing, I think, for um, the IT decision makers in general, right? Because you've got security. I mean, security seems to be on the forefront of everybody's mind right now when they're
That's a
making
good point.
decisions. Because you've got all these vulnerabilities being picked up and coming out, and some of them are really bad. So you've got these sort of AI security solutions that are popping up all over the place. But then, in the EUC world specifically, I mean, it's mind blowing, right? If you look at the amount of offerings you have, you've got your endpoints that you need to consider if you're doing any sort of remoting or not, just endpoints generally, desktops, laptops. How do you manage those? How do you patch them, secure them, deliver applications to them? And then you've got all these, for virtual offerings, you've got all these different cloud providers doing things. You've got on-prem solutions. You've got a service on top of a platform, and then how you deliver apps and how you patch all that. So from it used to be quite well known, right? You'd use SCCM for your machines, or maybe something else, but usually SCCM, and then you'd use Citrix or VMware, and you'd push out some desktops, or use just an RDP solution. It was pretty well known, and everybody knew which way they needed to go. Whereas now there's so many options, it's really difficult for businesses to make decisions. And I think as a consultant, it's quite, you have to know enough about all of these things in order to be able to drive a discussion and sort of point people in a direction. So where do I think it's going?
Interesting. I must confess, this is one of the reasons I think I moved into marketing, if that's what I do today, right? It is. I mean, you have to know so much. When I was an engineer in the trenches, it was a pretty, you lived in sort of silos, right? I was an app delivery guy. That's what I was. I knew a little bit about routers. I can configure them. I could, somewhat troubleshoot them, but it wasn't my job. We brought in this, the CCIEs or whatever the hardcore guys to do all that stuff, right? And nowadays, I think you really need to. I mean, you do a lot of SD-WAN and NetScale. I'm going to call it NetScalers, damn it. And you do a lot of that. That was never in my area of expertise or my discipline, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's very difficult to stay up to date. I don't know. I mean, I think I could do it if I was young again, but I would love it actually if I was young again. But it's a lot of work. Absolutely. Absolutely. You keep mentioning endpoints, and I've
Yeah.
said this one for a little bit, but I have to bring it up. I work at IGEL nowadays, but even before IGEL, you take away the IGEL hat, although of course I'm biased, right? But the idea of the endpoint, I think, has changed, and the idea that we have a, centralized, especially if we start talking WVD in the cloud, so if you look at the existing, and security, you brought up security, which is a big issue for everyone, right?
Yeah.
And how do you see the endpoint change, or what do you see as the requirements for the endpoint today? And do you see solutions, I'll say, like IGEL? Of course, we have competitors too. Do you see that help? Or, I'll leave it at that.
How do I see endpoints? I think I can be biased, can't I, Doug? Because I mean, I don't resell IGEL, right? But when people ask me what sort of endpoints they should be looking for, it always depends, right? It depends what they're trying to achieve.
Oh, of course, it always depends. Absolutely.
The main driver for me is are they using graphics? If they are, they need something that's beefy enough to also cope on the opposite end. But also, are they? What about comms? What about unified comms and pass through and optimization and stuff like that? They're the things that drive it. And the bottom line really is, I know there are other thin client vendors that supply endpoints with these optimizations, but IGEL usually has it first. And when you look at management, I mean, I've literally just recently, completely unbiased, been brought into a client's place of work, and they've shown me, we've got this particular thin client and this, and they're trying all these things, right? And they're like, oh, the microphone passes through on this one, but not on this one. And I'm like, look, just get an IGEL and try it, right? Because it will just work. And I think that's something in tech that is, people listen to the sales guy or pre-sales, whatever, and they just think we'll get this and it will just work. But that's what we do as consultants, right? We know actually what works. Just because it says it's going to work on the tin, it doesn't necessarily mean it will. So I think endpoint wise, I don't want people to pay for Windows licenses if they don't need them. I still struggle, I think, with the security factor, distributed devices and security and managing those devices. If something's offline for a period of time, it will still work and you can't manage it. So it's not managed. So I like the idea of having a thin device. I think Chrome have started with Chromebooks, right? And I thought that was fantastic when they first came out with it, because that's sort of like the first, from my point of view, real alternative to really segregating something away from like having a full-blown OS on something.
Yeah, the Windows monopoly, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, and they've started building in more offline capability into those. Now, the only thing I don't like is I have to have a Gmail account to use the thing. But if someone brought out something like that in a laptop that actually was usable offline somehow, but actually still supported all of the offloading capabilities and everything, if you wanted to use a feature-rich desktop, I think that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree. A couple comments. One, I was chatting with an EUC expert who was tried out IGEL, and I get this sort of angry message. And he said, well, I'm trying to configure this with this and this, and it just doesn't work. And I was like, well, what do you mean it doesn't work? The guy's an EUC expert. Don't give me it doesn't work. You know what I mean? That's like, the machine doesn't power on. Why? It's like, what's going on, guy? And then he finally comes back to me after chatting and goes, oh, I just thought it just worked. It works once you configure it, right? Because it's not as simple. It's a simple device, right? It becomes simple once you manage it and configure it. And once you set up that automation, as I like to say, or that, the configurations, then you just could deploy a new piece of hardware, you plug it in, it pulls down the config, and you're good to go. And there's no management required. It just works, right? But I wouldn't say these things are dumb in any way. There's still that it's definitely not an art, where Citrix it was always an art, right? You have to do so many different tweaks in this to really make it perfect. And or IGEL and other vendors too, but the idea of a thin client is not paying the Windows license, but also not having the Windows attack surface and the Windows management, and which is increased cost and management and headaches. At the end of the day, our users do what? They compute. Let them compute with what they need to compute with, and then let them go home. They don't need everything under the sun. And with Citrix style solutions, WVD, Microsoft, VMware, what have you, is we can do that today. That the technology's there. IGEL is definitely leading the way, but there's others out there too. If I could, to take off the bias hat, right?
I have a question for you, Doug.
Sure.
So IGEL, who would you say is your biggest competitor in the space?
Well, the big ones are Weiss and, Dell and HP, right? But those are box pushers. They're the ones, there's so many people that have HP or Dell contracts, right? And so their switches, their hubs, their routers, their servers, their desktops are HP or Dell. They everything they buy, and they buy them dirt cheap because they're buying so many of them. So that's definitely the biggest competitor, right? We're number 3 in the market, although we're growing, and we're nipping at their heels, which is quite amazing because we've done it really in about 3.5 years. And although the technology was always there, but we upped the awareness of what the folks in Germany built, right? But those are definitely the 2 biggest competitors. Then you run into things like Stratosphere, which really isn't a competitor once you start, peeling the layers off the onion. but they definitely have, Citrix talks about them, which, causes some, I wouldn't say issues, but, it's, muddies the water, so to speak. But the big guys are HP and Dell. But when we go head to head, we almost rarely lose a deal. And a lot of times, or not a lot, but and sometimes, the customer will say, you know what, we're going to buy HP or Dell, but we're going to install IGEL OS on top of it, right? Because we get these devices really cheap. They're decent enough for what we need, right? But the management isn't there. We can't do what we need to do. The headache is and the headache is worse than the cost of buying both. So we have a lot of customers, going with other hardware. And that's cool with us because we say, yeah, we sell hardware, but really what IGEL makes is software. We sell software, and it's an operating system for, as I like to say, the modern world, right? Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. And I think I agree with you. That's pretty much my experience.
Yeah.
And I mean, the Raspberry Pi type alternatives, you guys just need to bring one out.
Yeah. That would sure be cool. When I joined IGEL, I wanted two things. One, I wanted an Amazon client, which we have. The other thing, I wanted Workspace Hub and Pi support, right? And yeah, stay tuned. Jed said I don't know officially, and if I did, I couldn't tell you. But I know publicly that Jed and IGEL community meetup we had a couple months ago, someone asked him about the Pi. Actually, many people asked him about the Pi. And we did a Q&A with Jed, our CEO. And he said, stay tuned. We have something up our sleeves. So that's what I'll say to anybody listening. Stay tuned. And the thing about IGEL, the reason we didn't jump on this day one is IGEL provides really great experience. To us, we want to be the Apple or the Porsche, right? We're going to provide great usability. We're not just going to slap our operating system on something and have it suck. It's going to be that it works. You're going to get this experience out of it. Otherwise, we're not going to do it because we don't want to play that game. Others can suck. We're not going to. And so stay tuned. Yeah, that's what I'll say.
Cool.
Yeah. I would love it. I personally would love it. I see value to the Pi, but to me, at the end of the day, it has to work, right? I don't want a bunch of dongles. I don't want a headache. The Pi 4 definitely came a long way as far as giving us decent hardware. Really good hardware, really. And then it comes down to manageability, right? Can it do the type of stuff and of course, Corona changed a lot of things too. Like you mentioned numerous times, we need to be able to have that, Zoom working, Teams working, things like that, right? Yeah. And that's a big, everyone's doing Zoom, everyone's doing Teams, everyone's doing unified communications, right? So how do we, the devices need to be able to run that and run that well. And then stay up to date with the updates, and that's something I'm very proud of IGEL or for IGEL is that we tend to be 0 day. We're ready when they're ready, and that's really great. Really great stuff. So that being said, we've talked a lot about Microsoft, a little bit about Citrix, a little bit about EUC in general. What about VMware? They got Sean and Madden and Oglesby over there, and they got talent galore, right? And do you do any work with VMware? Where do you see VMware fit into this big giant EUC pie?
Ooh, that's a good one, Doug. VMware have the monopoly in the hypervisor market, right? That's sort of, anywhere you go, that's what people are putting in. Or that's what people are upgrading, right? And I think Horizon's come a long way as well. I've only ever had to do one deployment of Horizon. I say had like it's reluctant, but it's not really. And obviously I have it in the lab. But the thing I like about Citrix over the top of Horizon, when you look at them, when users are using them, there's not really a lot of difference, right? Manageability and everything else I think it's on par. There's just less requirements for a Citrix install. So dependent, but if the client's got Horizon there, a Horizon house, then that's what I work with. So but how do I think it stacks up? I think Workspace ONE looks really interesting. You've got the Citrix Cloud offerings, but I think Workspace ONE looks interesting. And obviously, I don't think it's coincidence that a lot of talent has gone to VMware, right? like you said, there's a lot of people that have, and I think Ron Oglesby went to VMware too.
Yeah. Ron, been about maybe 6 months or something. Talk about a smart. Well, I mean, they have the Madden's very smart guy. Sean Bass is my favorite of the bunch. No offense to anybody, but when I was a CTP, we used to have these meetings, and they'd ask a question to somebody, or be talking about something or what have you, right? And all the CTPs would give their 2 cents, and Sean would just sit there, and all of a sudden, we'd argue and bitch and complain. And all of a sudden, Sean's arm would go up, hand would go up, right? And the room would go quiet, and everyone would listen. I'd be doodling or something, not paying attention to the bullshit, and then Sean would come up, and I'd be like, oh my God, I can't wait. And genius. I mean, the kid is he's not a kid, but he's as smart as they come. It's probably one of the nicest people I've ever met too. I think the world of Sean Bass. I really honestly do.
So out of all these guys, the only one I've met is Brian Madden, and I was at the Login VSI VDI Performance Summit, first one they ran. I think it was 2019, and he was the last speaker, I think, and he came up sniffling, full of cold, with a pint of beer, and his presentation pops up on the screen, and he downed his pint in front of everybody, and then he started his presentation. So yeah,
he's a very bright kid too. Very, very, very bright. I mean, like I said, VMware has really good talent. My question has always been to anyone I bring the subject is VMware proper listening to Sean, listening to Ron, listening to Brian, listening to Gabe, and these guys that really understand the industry that's been around for a long time? The answer I usually get is yes, they are. And if you look at Workspace ONE, you look at what they're doing. I think they're making headway, right? Whether it's quick enough time, whether or not the world moves to a WVD style deployments before they're able to catch up. We had an argument within the IGEL community. Someone posted Citrix is king, and they said, "Oh no, Citrix is not king, but VMware's king." Like, don't fool yourself. Citrix is always the king. Will be the king for quite some time. I don't think VMware ever get there. I think it'll go from Citrix to Microsoft. But no offense to VMware, it's a great solution. Absolutely great solution.
I think there's something missing for me, Doug, in the next sort of step. You look at all these offerings with AI, and it's a workspace. It allows you to be more productive. You get alerts, and all that stuff's great. And I understand the benefits of integration and stuff, but people almost don't know what they want until you give it to them. And
that's definitely the case.
It sort of feels like a lot of these solutions are like, well, we think this is what people want, or how people need to use things. For me personally, I think the next level is some sort of like VR augmentation.
Oh,
so
God,
that you can.
Us.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that's.
Don't disagree with you. Keep going. I'm sorry. Keep going.
I think that's like the best. The best way I can describe it is, I could work so much faster if I could just plug in, and it would just come straight out of my head. It gets to a point where all the information that's coming at you is on 2 screens, 3 screens, whatever. I mean, Jesus, man, I've got to take all this information in from these 3 screens, and I've got to type and click, and it'd be so much quicker if you could just plug in. I mean, I'm not saying we'll plug in, but some sort of next step, some sort of VR included, I think would be pretty cool, like a VR workspace.
That would be neat. We have a guy at IGEL, Frederick, really great guy, and he actually worked with some of the Citrix folks, and he managed to get VR working over Citrix onto an IGEL UD3, which is our sort of entry level or base level thin client. It wasn't even the powerful UD6 or UD7, which is big GPUs, big CPUs, and all that stuff, right? Just on the base level, and we could do it. It was quite cool, And now there's so you could it's possible to do this today. But what you're talking about still takes some time, to sort of be able to plug in and, so to speak. I know what you're saying there, and I think everyone listening sort of understands. That little bit worries me. There's a lot of thoughts in my head I don't want people to know. You know what I mean? So I'll ask you some questions. You don't want what you really want to say to come out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's true.
There's
That's
something
true.
called politically correct. So,
Got to be a filter driver for that, Doug.
yeah, there you go. There you go. We have Kevin Goodwin write one, right? Yeah, we need a filter driver for this. The FS, or what would be called? Like AI logics or
Logic.
VR logic. There you go.
We've got to be careful because Kevin might have already patented that or something.
Yeah, ain't that the case? Yeah, totally, totally. Okay, buddy, I have one more last question for you, and then we'll call it an episode. And this one I have to ask, so you know it's coming. I teased it to you. So Citrix changed their logo. What do you think?
I think it's still coming out, right? There's like all these things on Twitter with individual logos and stuff, and there may have been some discussions that I may have been party to that I'm not able to share. But if we look at what they've got right now, it looks like they have these individual type logos, right, which look like they're going to maybe be like brands for services. What do I think of the logo? I mean, it's a logo. I think I liked. I want to see what the relationship is with the logo and the what the next steps are. I think the website's pretty cool, but I have to say for a firm that works with remoting solutions, maybe full screen video on a web browser isn't such a great idea. I don't know if you've seen the website, Doug, but literally there's full screen video on the website when it loads.
Yeah. I've seen it.
So yeah, Citrix. Anyone that tweets and says go to our website and they're on a virtual desktop, they're killing it right now. Okay. I think it's all right, Doug. I mean, in all honesty, a logo is a logo. It depends what it means. Usually when companies rebrand, it's because they're changing direction or introducing new products, and we only had the rebranding not so long ago, right? From NetScaler to ADC.
Sure.
It doesn't really feel that long ago. So all the product names are rebranded. So it's a little bit difficult to get excited about this one, in my view.
Interesting. Ed, I'll tell you my view because I get to do that if I want. I'm the host. I can say anything I want.
Do it.
At first, I was like, oh, God, please no. And then I went to go see it. And I must confess, someone leaked it to me a couple months ago. So I saw this thing, and a friend of mine leaked it to me. Anyway, I was like, oh, God, help me. But I'm the last guy. I like change. I'm okay with change, but we're all change adverse. And it makes me think of two things. One, Slack changed their logo from the iconic sort of hashtag thing. And I loved that logo. I thought it was such a great logo. And today I forget that they ever had that in some ways, right? Yeah. And the other thing I think of is, I think of the iOS, I think it was 5 to 6 or 6 to 7, I forget, where they changed from the old look to the flat design. And I hated the flat design. I just absolutely hated it. I was like, what are you doing? This is awful. Steve would kill you, blah, 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 blah. Now I look at the old pictures. I'm like, that is so awful. And that is just so ugly. I mean, why would anyone like it? It looks like a child. It looks like 1990s, awful web design, And so with a grain of salt, I say to myself, give it some time. And my wife loved it, by the way. She thought it was really modern and cool, and she liked it. To me, Citrix's logo is like part of my blood. I always said I hated when they got rid of the red dots and they went to the white dots, because I always told people my blood is Citrix dot red. And so, changing something that's so iconic, that's been in your life for 20 years is difficult, right? It's like changing your child's name or something. Not that Citrix is my kid, but maybe it's like changing your father's name, right?
Yeah.
And so it's very difficult. But at the same time, I can't argue with that. The better question is not, what do you think of the logo today? The better question is, what do you think about the logo in a year, right? And when it becomes ingrained into your brain and when it becomes normal. I don't know why they needed to do it, but I mean, they have their methods. They're smarter people than me. They contracted the right, brand experts and things of that nature. They know what they're doing. Who am I to blow against the wind, right? So half of me hates it, half of me, sort of loves it. My wife loved it, so she's smarter than I am too.
I think my opinion on stuff like that, Doug. I mean, if me and the wife are decorating the house, she chooses the color of the paint, right?
Yeah.
It to me, it's just a wall. It serves a purpose as a wall or a door. So and I'm actually like colorblind, red and green. So like my view on colors is always way off. Like I'm like, oh, that purple one up there, and she's like, no, that's blue. So um, so I
Yeah,
suppose
yeah.
from
Women,
that point of
women
view,
actually see colors different than men do. My wife and I constantly argue about colors. She's like, "You're colorblind." No, I am not. But I think she is. We're going to go to our death arguing about that
yeah,
and the American culture. she's German. We argue about the American culture all the time, which is worth arguing about.
yeah. I think, but on the logo, I'm excited to see what all this is about.
Yeah, I wish him. I wish Citrix such luck, and I don't take a side. I mean, I have my favorites. I have the people that I love the company. I'm here today because of the company. Uh, um, but at the end of the day, what I want to succeed is remoting. The idea of the centralized computing. That's what I care about. That's what I bought onto. Right, Citrix
Mm,
just happened to be that company doing it in those days. Right, but that's what I want, and I want a better endpoint. IGEL. I work for IGEL, so obviously I want IGEL to win. But if someone comes along that does it better than IGEL, that's great. That's because the customer wins, and that's what I ultimately care about. And if I could try to step out of the bias, Doug, uh, um, which isn't always easy, then but I think that's the promise a lot of people made themselves, when we were consultants. You're still a consultant, right? Um,
yeah.
and so to sort of do what's best and sell it, like you said too, it all depends, right?
Hmm.
If you meet a consultant that doesn't give you the answer, well, it all depends, he's not a consultant or she's not a consultant, right?
Yeah. Give me more information is what that means.
Yeah, that's exactly. Or I don't want to tell you the truth. Okay, my friend, I've so enjoyed this, but we'll go ahead and call it an episode. Unless there's any other subjects you want to talk about, maybe the price of tea in China, iOS 14. Are you an Apple guy, or what kind of phone do you have?
No,
iPhone, Android?
Android, Doug, Android.
Oh,
And you know what? It's even more dirty because it is a Samsung.
oh. It's okay. It's okay. I tried Android years ago, but I think it was 2011 I tried Android, and it just wasn't it was the wrong time to try it. It was too early, and I hated it
I'll
so
try it again.
much. Yeah, I had lost my iPhone, or actually I didn't lose it. I left it in a friend's house, and I left his house. I went to the airport. He went to the airport with me and went to France. So when I realized I left my phone in his house, he was already on a flight to France. I was on a flight to Florida, or I was in the airport going, damn it, I lost it. So I had about a month or 3 weeks or something. So I ended up buying. I was like, you know what, I'll buy an Android to it, and I hated it. So as soon as he got back to town, he had like 50 voicemails. Send me my iPhone. So yeah. And you live in a walled garden too, right? Everything I do is Apple. My Mac, my iPhone, my iPad, my Apple TV. So
People rave about them. I've never had one. I do need a laptop upgrade though. So maybe it's time.
yeah, it's all what you like, man. Nowadays they all do the same stuff. It's yeah, it's interesting. Okay, Leee, thank you so much for taking the time. I really enjoyed it. It's always fun to chat with you. It's always fun to chat with the EUC experts too, because they see things a little bit differently. So yeah, what do I say? But thanks so much, my friend.
Thanks, Doug. You have a good evening.
Hey, thank you so much.
Cheers, man.
Okay, that concludes another successful episode of DABCC Radio. Thank you very much, Leee, for taking the time to do this. I really enjoyed it. Really great guy, very sharp, and we had a wonderful talk before the podcast, and then, of course, you heard the podcast, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you'd like to be on the show, please let me know. Send me an email, brown@igel.com, dbrown@dabcc.com, and we'll make that happen. If you like the show, as I always say, please tell a friend. If you don't like it, tell me. Right? I never get emails telling me anyone don't like it. So come on. Well, don't come on, but don't do that. Maybe everyone loves it. I don't know. So I have no other rants for you today. I've been sort of lecturing people. do this. Here's a story. I don't have any fun stories for you. I've just been plugging away at my job at IGEL, having a grand old time doing that. You know, if you want to learn more about what the folks at IGEL are doing, definitely join the IGEL community. IGELcommunity.com/join or join.igelcommunity.com, and you know, you'll find some neat stuff. We're really doing a lot of great things, and there's just amazing folks in this community that are, well, you know what they say is we have the best community in the EUC world, and I could not be prouder about that because it's those guys that make it, guys and gals, of course. So what else do I say? But thank you all for listening to what? Yeah, DABCC Radio.
CC?
DABC.
Say it again, DABCC.
DABC.
Can you say it again, DABCC?
DABC.
How about DABCC?
DABC.
DABCC.
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 DABCC.